is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions defense for 2021, as there's a lot of questions on what this defense could look like next season. And while I don't have the answers, I do have a couple of ideas I thought I would throw out there. So let's get it started.
You know, I got to shout out DoseOfDion, man, because it was actually the first time I went live on YouTube. And, you know, guys don't know DoseOfDion. He put out a lot of good content for the Detroit Lions.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're talking about the Lions defense as the legal tampering period for free agency is about to begin in a few hours. So I thought this would be a good time to do this video on some things that we could potentially see with this Lions defense heading into this offseason and also into the new season. Now, there are a lot of rumors out there on players that Lions will be interested in, and we're going to try to get into those as best as possible tomorrow. And then, obviously, once Lions start making moves and things like that, we're going to talk about all of it. But we'll try to get into a lot of the rumors tomorrow, maybe not as specific with breakdowns, but just try to get all the names out there. That way, we're all to know what the Lions could be targeting. But I thought I would go today and take a look at Aaron Glenn and some of his background and things that could change with this defense and what that could mean for certain players that are here. And maybe certain players that we thought would be cut, maybe they stay. Maybe certain players that we thought would stay, maybe get cut. So I just had a couple of things that I want to touch on. So let's take a look at Aaron Glenn. And now he's a first-time defensive coordinator, so we don't know what he's going to do, right? We have no idea what he's going to do as a first-time defensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions. But we do know about a few moves the Lions have made around him, which could have potentially given us some answers. So I thought I would touch on it in today's video. Aaron Glenn does have a background of playing for Bill Parcells and the defensive coordinator and working for defensive coordinator Bill Belichick, which means he has some similarities to what our past staff was with Matt Patricia in the way that, you know, he's kind of learned, right? He's learned through a similar vision that Matt Patricia kind of brought to the team. Not the exact same, but just some similarities in terms of scheme there when he was a player. Stints as a player with Mike Zimmer, Todd Bowles. And then you take a look at him as a coach. We know that he was with the New Orleans Saints. Recently, the New Orleans Saints last season, they were a very aggressive defense that played a 4-3 defense last year, but he was only the secondary coach, so he only worked with the secondary side of things. Then gave us some quotes, and I think there's some important quotes that we can look at for things that could potentially happen to the Lions defense next season that are important to react to. The fact that it was going to be a multiple defense, which you see a lot in the NFL today, just multiple defense, different schemes, it makes it a lot of different things. So, I mean, it's really hard to just say what a base is, but every team seems to have a base defense. But, you know, in today's league, a lot of things they kind of work around because there's so much passing and things like that, that you get variations of different defensive schemes and what things are going to be brought to the table. But he did say this, and I thought this was a very important quote that we should look at. Bill Parcells taught me this: make sure you surround yourself from the same tribe. We are from the same tribe as far as coverage. That attached me to Aubrey Pleasant. As far as a split safety coverage they did with the Rams, I've been part of Vic Fangio's systems for a while. Now, he played for Vic Fangio, and he says this, even played for Vic when I was, you know, with the Texans. So again, a lot of these coaches that you're going to see that's with me, right, is from the same tribe. So that means that, okay, basically, let's take a look at who the Lions brought in around Aaron Glenn. You know, what kind of coach they bring in and where are those guys from? Because he's saying from the same tribe is that, hey, I'm bringing in guys that, you know, kind of do the same things. What drew me to Aubrey Pleasant was the fact that there was a split safety look that they ran there, which basically kind of tells you that that's probably what the Lions are going to run next season. So for the Lions defense, we know that what Aaron Glenn has done in the past is play cover 2 man heavy, so expect man heavy defense potentially for the Lions, and also a split safety look because he's in the same tribe, Aubrey Pleasant, as to what they did with the Rams last season. It's perfect from the cornerback position because Amani Oruwari and Jeffrey Okudah are both man-to-man corners. What else could we see from the Lions defense next season? Just some predictions because we don't know. So what else could we see from the Lions defense? I think one of the biggest differences we could potentially see is what the gap integrity looks like for the Lions next season. So in the past with Matt Patricia, it was a 2-gap defensive scheme, which basically meant that our defensive linemen in a 3-4 defense, base 3-4, mixed into 4-3, but it was a 2-gap scheme, which meant the defensive linemen were responsible for 2 gaps. That meant the defensive linemen were getting as much pressure, weren't making as many plays in the backfield. They were lane cloggers. Now with the Saints last season, we saw that because he was a secondary coach, so he wasn't part of it directly, but we did see the Saints, they ran a 1-gap scheme, which basically, because they were in the 4-3, allowed their defensive linemen to get more pressure. It allowed Cam Jordan, Hendrickson, these guys to get after the quarterback because they were responsible for 1 gap. So for the Detroit Lions, could we see that more next season? Because in the past, we didn't see that. Well, if you look at the past of Aaron Glenn, it wouldn't really support that, right? Because he's played for guys that ran 2 gaps, you know, in the past, 2-gap schemes. What Aaron Glenn told us is that he was going to fit the scheme to the players, not the players to the scheme. So basically, he's going to take the players that are here and whoever he brings in and try to fit them to the scheme. But there's clearly somewhere you have to go with that, right? You have to know what you're building towards. So what have we noticed so far? Well, the Lions have restructured Jamie Collins. They have restructured Jamie Collins. They have cut Christian Jones. Got a rumor they were going to cut Danny Shelton, but they haven't. John Pennicini is still here, as he should be. So at least based on the moves we've seen so far, and free agency is going to tell a lot, could we potentially see the Lions valuing more athletic, speedy linebackers with the cutting of Christian Jones, which could allow us to see more of Julian Okwara, maybe some more Austin Bryant, but maybe Julian Okwara filling out a similar role. Restructuring Jamie Collins, which means he's going nowhere, even though he's got some size. You know, he's a little bit more of an athletic linebacker than a guy like Jelani Tavai. And we know the interest they've expressed in bringing back Jarrad Davis, but we have also been told that Jarrad Davis is going to get a lot of interest from teams in free agency. So maybe the Lions are valuing more athletic, speedy linebackers. And then at the defensive line spot, the Lions have kept around some of those bigger defensive linemen that were brought in by the pass regime. Nick Williams, John Pennicini, Dan Shelton, they're all still here. Now, they could be cut, and tomorrow this could all change, and that could start to tell us where they're going. Again, I'm not predicting this is where they're going. I'm just saying, just look at what the Lions are building defensively and what could actually happen, on what moves have been made so far. They seem to be valuing, potentially, speedier, more athletic linebackers, and maybe they're keeping around some of these bigger defensive linemen to keep it in what he knows, which is a two-gap front. But while that could still be the case, we could still see one gap. All right, now how could we see one gap? Well, you could make the case that the guys that we have on this roster, Nick Williams, John Pennicini, they're actually better penetration players than they were used for in a two-gap scheme. They may be better fit for one gap than two gap. That could fit from the Lions is you still kind of use a nose tackle, which could be John Pennicini. It could be Danny Shelton if they keep him. But let's just say John Pennicini, for example, because you still do use that nose tackle. The difference is now that nose tackle lines up between the guard and the center. They don't let up head-on with the center. They let up between the guard and the center because you're still in a 3-4 defense, whether that's over or under. If it's over, it's under to the strong side. If it's under, it's to the weak side. It's all about attacking with the defensive line. Now, you may be thinking, well, the Lions got some huge defensive linemen. How is this going to work? The Lions actually don't have huge defensive linemen if you take in consideration a one-gap scheme. Actually, guys like Trey Flowers, if they bring Romeo Okwara back, those guys with that size, they fit a one-gap scheme better than a two-gap scheme. Two-gap is usually around 300 pounds. We're talking guys around 260, 270. So they actually fit somewhat better in a one-gap scheme because it's less of a lane clogger. At that point, it's more of getting after it. Even Nick Williams is only 290 pounds, which can arguably fit into this as well, as he's known to get after the quarterback. So these guys can get in there on a 3-4 defense to get after the quarterback. And this almost starts to resemble somewhat of a 4-3 look, where you get linebacker positions such as the jack roll. Jack roll is a player that's kind of a tweener between defensive line and between linebacker. What this could be is potentially maybe Austin Bryant, because I think Austin Bryant could play this role because he could play out in space, kind of like a weak side defensive end that can drop into coverage, but he's also kind of athletic. But I also could definitely see this being Julian Okwara next season and him taking this role. We cut Christian Jones, but Okwara could take this role because he's got some solid size. He's actually, to put this in perspective, if you compare this to the LA Chargers, whose defensive line coach Griff Smith runs a one-gap 3-4 defense, Melvin Ingram is actually a little bit smaller than Julian Okwara. All right, so there's some similarities there. On Julian Okwara could be our Melvin Ingram next season. Now, they didn't have Melvin Ingram to drop that often into coverage. Julian Okwara has done it, just not a ton, but he's the type of guy that's going to go get pressure. And that's what he could be for the Lions next season. Or it could be Austin Bryant. They could compete for that role. Very similar. My point is a 4-3 under defense is very similar to a 3-4 one-gap defense. So what we saw the Saints run last season, even though it's still classified as a 3-4, it's very similar to a 4-3 because you're running basically the same 4-3 schemes while also being in a 3-4 defense, which could fit the personnel that the Lions have this season, allow our defense line to be more attacking and maybe make more plays in the backfield than it has in the past, and allow our linebackers to play in space. And if Lions are going to something towards this, keep an eye out for guys like Alex Anzalone in free agency, those type of linebackers. So if the Lions do cut Danny Shelton, which is the rumor that we have, John Pennicini, Nick Williams, these guys can actually get penetration, which means that we could be looking at more one gap next season, which could be more pressure from defensive linemen, which could mean more pressure for a guy like Trey Flowers, and it means maybe more athletic and speedy linebackers, which we've already seen so far. So this rumor out there, the Lions almost hired Griff Smith. Now, he worked with the LA Chargers, and Griff Smith, what's interesting about him is that he worked in a one-gap defensive line set. Since the Lions didn't hire Griff Smith, they did hire Todd Wash. Now, Todd Wash is coming from Jacksonville to be our defensive line coach, and while he did run a 4-3 defense, which again is possible for the Lions to run next season if they want to, he was also a big part of a one-gap defense. He's said over and over they weren't built for a two-gap defensive line, and the Lions hired that guy. So again, part of a one-gap defensive front that played 4-3. Lions can still play 4-3, but I'm just saying one gap could be possible even though the background shows two-gap. Gap can be more dangerous because it can give up big plays if you don't fill your lanes correctly. You can play a one gap defense while also playing a 3-4. So what we could potentially see for Lions next season, just a thought which would be different from what we saw in the past, is potentially the Lions mix in some one gap defense while also staying in a 3-4 defense, with 4-3, the 4-3 scheme, while using the 3-4 based on the players that you have. You could expect a more of a split safety look than the deep safety look, which is what we got last season with Deron Harmon. So, we can mix that in because they did with Marcus Williams. We kind of know what we're getting from the secondary. It's about the front seven. So my point is, just take a look at what the Lions do in free agency, who they draft, and it'll kind of give you maybe a feeling on what the Lions are going to look to do defensively. But one thing they also did was hire Dom Capers. Now, Dom Capers is kind of going to be that guy that overlooks everything. Now, Dom Capers also has a history of running a 3-4 defense, but Dom Capers is also known for being extremely aggressive, which the Lions weren't last season, getting after the quarterback, sending pressure, stunts, blitzes, loops like that. Major differences we can see, even if the Lions stay in a 3-4, even if they stay in a 2-gap system, which it could go to 1, the Lions could be bringing more pressure, being more aggressive defensively, which I know a lot of fans would love to see after last regime not being that aggressive, kind of letting things happen. Instead, the Lions could be more attacking, more getting after it, which is also something that I saw with the Rams as well. Dom Capers brings that. Guys that we've hired like to do that. So expect the Lions to be a more aggressive defense, and that's also what we saw Aaron Glenn came from with the New Orleans Saints. So expect them to be more aggressive next season, which would be great. I know people would love to see that. So that's why the Lions have been rumored interested in man-to-man corners like Janoris Jenkins and also safeties like John Johnson. And we'll probably have videos on those because we're going to talk about before free agency really kicks off on the 17th, likely tomorrow. Lions do go to a one-gap type of defense system. It's going to be interesting to see what Trey Flowers can do because he's never been a part of that, right? He was with the Patriots before he got here, which was a 2-gap system as well. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact they can get out of Trey Flowers, but his versatility allows him to line up like a Melvin Ingram if you wanted to on the outside. If you're in a 4-3, you can make him a defensive tackle. On third downs, I've seen this guy line up like the nose tackle. You could put him anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact he could have in a one-gap scheme where instead of it's about filling your lane, it's more about just getting after it. Put up bigger numbers from the defensive line spot in the backfield if you're in a one-gap system. So you could see bigger numbers from Trey Flowers. We know that he's capped at like 7.5 sacks. That could change if this changes. There's a big difference between one gap, and it definitely changes your needs. If the Lions go to a one-gap defense, it could be important to find smaller sideline-to-sideline linebackers. That's why I bring up Anzalone. That could fit really well. Jalen Reeves-Maben, guys like that. But Jared Davis is an interesting one because not only was he drafted to play a 4-3 scheme with Terrell Austin, who used a one-gap system, he was also drafted to a one-gap scheme because of his sideline-to-sideline speed, because of his ability to play downhill and attack a single gap. This is probably a big reason why Jared Davis is getting so much hype, and we'll talk about this later, but because if you put him in a one-gap scheme, he's playing downhill. He's not taking on linebackers. This is why he had to bulk up, because you look at guys like Jelani Tavai, they have to take on offensive linemen downfield in a 2-gap scheme. So he was drafted for the completely wrong scheme, and this is why teams believe that he can still fit because of his athletic ability. His sideline-to-sideline ability is top-notch. That's why he was drafted so high. Very different from a 2-gap scheme for linebackers, and what you need. Smaller linebackers are more beneficial in a 1-gap scheme. So Lions, if they start going that way in free agency, it could be a one-gap look next season. If they start trending towards bigger guys, continuing that, you could see 2 gaps once again. Both of them can work. It's just a different way to go about it. There's that potential with his background that the Lions don't go to 1-gap. They stay in 2-gap because of his background. They stay in a base 3-4, and it's very similar to what we saw. But the big difference to me is going to be Dom Capers, because Dom Capers will bring pressure. All right, stunts, loops, things that the Lions didn't do in the past. Now, he's not the DC, but he's going to be a guy that's going to influence getting after the quarterback, because Aaron Glenn was already a part of that. Now you got someone that does that. So let me know your thoughts, comments below. What differences do you want to see in the Lions defense this upcoming season, aside from not giving up the most points in franchise history? Thank you, Brad, for watching, and I'm out.